Filipino Studies, a discipline or collection of classes, usually in higher education, that explores the history, migration, or language of peoples from the Philippines. It has different meanings and values to different people. To some, Filipino Studies is deemed unnecessary. To others, it's an easy A. But to a dedicated few, it was life's blood. To me, Filipino Studies connected the dots of my life. Learning and practicing the grammatical structure of Tagalog in a classroom setting allowed me to comprehend the vernacular of my family and articulate the expressions of my Filipino-ness without shame or embarrassment. Discovering the history and culture of my people provided me with a map and timeline of how my family uprooted their lives in their homeland to come to the United States, seeking the cultural and material desires of the West. Filipino Studies gave me an understanding of how I came to be. But more than just a way to propagate and inform the Filipino American self, Filipino Studies provides a unique lens to view larger global forces that haunt humankind every day. Imperialism, capitalism, racism, sexism, Orientalism, and all the isms that continue to make this world unjust for so many people. Filipino Studies provided me and countless others the knowledge, tools, and sense of purpose to engage in the contemporary struggle for social justice. And yet, academia continues to push and subsume Filipino Studies and other colored bodies of knowledge to the margins. It is this regime of erasure that makes its institutionalization in academic and community spaces a constant uphill battle. Even in San Francisco State, the birthplace of modern ethnic studies, students and scholars continue to fight university administrators for equitable funding, preventing the discipline from disappearing into neoliberal oblivion. To many Filipino Americans, this struggle seems fleeting. Why waste your time when STEM classes are the pathways to financial bliss? And yet, I'm inspired by the thousands of Filipino Americans who have dedicated their lives to keep Filipino Studies alive in all its myriad forms and discourses. It's a fight worth fighting for, I say. Perhaps one of the bravest fights for Filipino Americans amidst all those isms that try to defeat us. It's a fight for the right to exist.
My secret, just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States at Iba Pa. My name is Elaine Dalalas, and I am here with my fellow co-hosts,
Ryan Carpio,
Joe Bernardo.
Awesome. And we have our two guests today. Can you please introduce yourselves?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on. My name is Kevin Casasola. I am a fourth-year stats major at UCLA. I'm the education coordinator for Samahang Filipino at UCLA, as well as the resident assistant for the brand new Filipino floor.
Awesome.
Wow. That's a lot.
That's a long resume.
Awesome. And then our second guest who's also joining us today.
Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. My name is Ivy Dulay Daulo, and I teach currently as a lecturer at Cal State Long Beach, our beginning Filipino class, intermediate Filipino class, and Asian American family as of the moment. So happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you for being here with us. Before we interview our lovely guests, we're going to chat about our own experiences with Filipino studies in college and whatnot. So, first question, why did you go to college?
You're looking at me. Is
I
it
am.
me?
Well, I can go
Why?
first.
Well, because you're wearing the cowl.
Because you're wearing the cowl.
Oh, I
shirt.
am.
Well,
I am.
why
Represent.
But why did I go to college? Because I feel like I didn't have a choice. Like, it was like high school was over and it was just a natural progression that I was going to go to college. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me too, I think it was kind of instilled in myself and my brothers early on when my dad didn't finish college. So when we came here, it's like, oh, you're going to school, you're going to finish school. It was never like finish high school.
Yeah.
It was like, you're going to go and
You're
finish.
gonna finish.
And then go to college. And, that's, I really didn't have, it wasn't really like I didn't have a choice, but it was like the path that was laid out for me. It's like, you're going there after you graduate high school. And so that's what I did. And I went to a college prep school, so they kind of drilled it in our heads and all that stuff. So, what about you, Joe?
To go to friendship games.
You didn't even know about
Did you know what friendship games was?
Yeah, I went when I was in high school.
Oh, you did?
You did?
Yeah.
Oh man,
I didn't know.
I went with
knew.
CSUN FASA.
Oh,
When you were in high school?
When I was in high school, I was a senior in high school, and my cousin was involved with FASA, and I kind of went to the meetings and learned what friendship games was, and
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is kind of fun.
I knew what it was about, and a lot of my high school friends, my brothers are older, so I was like super excited about it. Actually, in our high school, we teamed up with a whole bunch of, I don't know if St. John's was part of that, but we teamed up with a whole bunch of other high schools, like Catholic high schools, and we did like a
No,
friendship games.
there's a Catholic school version of friendship games.
Yeah, we did.
I did know about it, but I didn't go to it.
Yeah,
That was because boys wanted to meet girls, and girls wanted
That's
to meet
basically
boys.
what
I
I did.
didn't go there. Everyone says like, oh, you only go there because there's a big meat market or there's like a wet T-shirt contest. Like,
I didn't even know.
no,
that
I know
existed.
there is no wet T-shirt contest.
Yes, there is.
Okay, fine. There are people. Yeah.
Okay. For
yeah, there
people who
was,
don't
there
know,
was.
like at friendship games, there is a game.
Okay, well, what is friendship game?
Friendship games is like this event where all the Filipino clubs in California and even like Nevada and sometimes Texas, because that's where I remember like some
Yeah, I
school
remember
came out.
that,
And you do like these random like giant outdoor icebreakers or outdoor games. And one game in particular that is basically a wet T-shirt contest is there are a bunch of people are in a line, and then you have to pass a bucket of water from the front to the end of the game.
I guess it's a.
And you
whatever.
end up getting wet. And the whole point is like it's usually girls wearing tight T-shirts and they get
That's
super
true.
soaked.
But I didn't
That
go
is
there
wet
for
T-shirt.
that. I didn't go. I was just mesmerized because it was like, wow.
I'm
It's like,
shaking my head at you, Joe.
you understand? I grew up in a not non-Filipino area, and I was mesmerized by how many Filipinos there were all
Yeah.
over the country, or all over usually California, and kind of went to this place. So I wasn't into all that stuff. But to answer your question, I didn't have a choice to go to college. Both my parents went to college, and their grandparents went to college, or my grandparents went to college, and it was just a natural progression. I get in my middle class Filipino American household that you eventually go to college, and yeah, that's how I went.
What was your major in college? I was an Asian American Studies and Film Studies major. I came in as a Film Studies major. And then my parents thought I was going to make movies, and that's not what I wanted to do. I just wanted to watch movies and write about them.
Cool.
And then I was about to be finished, and I picked up Asian Am because I was like, I really like studying like about Asian American studies, and I like taking Filipino studies class, like Philippine history and stuff like that. So that's how I stayed. Yeah.
Cool. I started off as a molecular and cell biology major, and keyword is started off as that. And then I ended up doing kind of like an interdisciplinary studies at Cal, doing public health instead. I kind of got away from the sciences. One, because it was very difficult. The upper division classes were really, really hard. And but also I didn't think I wanted to be a doctor or anything like that. I think I kind of had this self-imposed, I needed to be in the sciences field. And yeah, so I wrote a thesis on
You wrote a thesis?
yeah, on AIDS and the Filipino community, actually.
AIDS.
What?
Yeah, this was in 2002 when I wrote it, but the HIV and AIDS and the
Did you like go to Banyan Tree or APIT for like data? Like how did
it was just all just research.
So did you just ask old Filipinos how old they were?
Because of their Joe.
Oh my God,
from
Joe. Dad
but it was like a mini thesis, and it was kind of cool. But that's what I did, and then that's what I studied in college. So my last semester in college was just a thesis class and hanging out with my roommates and my friends
Checking
and
out girls.
and
Checking out girls.
that too, but and working at the library and
Were you checked out girls?
books. Checked out books. Library people, library.
What about you, Joe?
I was undeclared when I went in,
Oh.
but I knew I wanted to be in somewhere like in the social sciences or humanities.
Mm-hmm.
I was always just interested in history and sociology, anthropology, etc. So I didn't know which one. I was thinking poli-sci. My freshman year, I was just searching, and then I discovered like Asian American Studies,
Awesome.
and then is all she wrote after that. I was Asian American Studies major, double majored with global and international studies, which was like a new major when I got there.
That makes it sound like you're gonna go into business.
I know, or like international politics. Or something, right?
But your mom hoped that.
Well, no, I was in politics for a while.
Yeah, did something like that. Sorry, bad. I'm not good at the dad joke. Sorry.
So then I was Asian American Studies, and then I was a history minor, and then going into it, my Lola was like, "Ano yung Asian Studies? What do you do?"
Study Asians.
I know. Dapat maging nurse ka.
Yeah.
Yuck.
I know. So, and then after that, it was just nonstop. I was an Asian American Studies master's student in San Francisco State, and then I was a history PhD student, specialized in Asian American history.
Dr.
Nice,
Joe
Dr. Joe.
Bernardo.
We're all very proud of you, Joe.
We're so
Thank you.
proud. We know a doctor.
Who can't fix anything in the body.
Surprisingly, like my parents, I didn't have that pressure to be like to have a degree that meant something like that led. I mean, not that. I mean to have a degree that led to an automatic job, like bio to be a doctor or anything like that. I think my parents knew, like based on my high school grades, that being a doctor was not in the cards. And I think it's because my dad also had an experience in college where like he studied law, and it wasn't, I think, what he wanted to study, but it was what he was pressured to do. And he never took the bar in the Philippines. And by the time he took the bar, it was like martial law. So there was no way he could have even practiced if he passed. So he kind of understood that experience of like pressure in college to pursue something that you don't like. So I didn't have that at all, which I am very, very grateful for, because I didn't have that like you have to be an engineer type of pressure from my parents.
My parents wanted me to be a lawyer.
Yeah, my mom thought I was going to be because I argue a lot, but
I don't think my parents pressured me either. I think the pressure I think I put it on myself. I think there was a lot of just stories we talk about. My parents are totally cool and chill about that stuff. And I remember just being all stressed out about what I was supposed to do and supposed to be, and my mom was like, "Dude, just finish and be happy," kind of thing. It was really enlightening. I was like, "Oh man, what's all this pressure I've been putting on myself this whole time?"
And like you hear from other people, and you're like, "I don't get that." I don't understand.
Yeah. So I'm like, man, okay. So, but they were totally chill. My dad's like, just kind of finish. I was like, my first few weeks in school, I was the first one to move away to go to school. So that was hard. That was like a transition of like moving away, right? There's always this away thing.
So your siblings didn't go to college, or they went to college, but locally?
Yeah, locally.
Okay.
So it was that was a family affair. Like the transition of me being away from Los Angeles was a family thing.
Yeah.
Everybody moved me up there.
Oh, Yan, it's so away.
So it was kind of it was very interesting. It was almost like that part of that journey was not just mine, and it was kind of cool and enlightening throughout the years I was in Cal. So,
And wait, what about you, Elaine? Did you have? I know you didn't have family pressure, but did you have any pressure because you were an only child?
I did. So I didn't apply to UCI for college, but that's where I went because the UC has this thing, or
UC
it had
Irvine for
UC
people who
Irvine
are
for
in
don't know.
California.
Yeah, the UC system in California had this thing that if you applied to the system, you would at least get into one of the schools. So if you didn't get into the school you currently applied to, like a top tier school, they would bump you. They would just shift your application or put you into another one. So I applied to Berkeley, LA, and San Diego. I think. Yeah, I applied to those 3. And I got into Irvine. Because I still met the requirements to be an accepted student in the system.
Yeah.
So they just put you in a lower tiered school. So Irvine at the time was a lower tiered school. I didn't know what Irvine was. I had been accepted to Rutgers University in New Jersey, in Newark, New Jersey.
Wow.
Oh no, New Brunswick. And I told my parents I'm going to New Jersey. Like I was like all excited. I was like, I'm going to move to New Jersey. It's so close to New York. I'm going to go watch Broadway shows all the time. I'm going to be by myself. Like, peace out, California. And my parents were so not about that. They were like, no. Because the other school that I got into was CSUN. And I was like, I don't want to go to CSUN. Like, everybody from St. Genevieve is going to be there. And no offense to my friends from St. Genevieve, but like, I wanted a new experience.
Yeah.
I wanted to get out of the valley. That was where I was determined to get out and to grow.
Welcome back to the valley.
I know, I'm back here. But then like I got an envelope from Irvine and then I realized like, oh crap, I got in. And so I went to the visiting day for Irvine, and my cousin, someone who we call cousin but not blood related, she was giving tours of the campus. And I kind of liked it. And I was like, okay, I'll go. And then my parents said, we'll buy you a car if you stay in California.
That bribe. Oh, that car bribe. Stop it, parents.
And I was like, oh, I don't even... at that time, I didn't even have my driver's license. So I was like, well, it's a car. And so I said yes.
I blame the prices right.
Oh, but you didn't need a car in New Jersey.
I know.
I wouldn't have needed one in New Jersey, but
Well, kind of. Yeah.
But you know, like at the end of the day, it was like the best decision of my life because I met Mike there.
Oh, look at Mike smile. Oh,
Don't give me that face.
He made a
You
he made
fell
a
in
heart.
love with me
He made a heart thing with his hands.
But and also I was able to be home, and I think like I was an hour away from home, so like it was still far enough that I was far, but I could still go home.
Yeah.
And it kind of was like a blessing in disguise because my mom had a stroke my 5th year of school.
wow.
And had I been in New Jersey, it would have been like it would have taken me a flight. It would have been like stressed out to come back to LA.
Yeah.
But because I was only in Orange County, like I could drive home and be there for my family. So it, at the end of the day, like it was where I was supposed to be.
Cool.
Yeah, and like changing gears, Tagalog.
Oh yeah.
My school did not have Tagalog. They had a test, like a proficiency test, so you had a language requirement to graduate, and you just needed to be at like this language, like the 2 section, like you had to pass that series, the 2 series, 2 ABC.
I took the test, the Tagalog.
Did you pass out of the test?
Yeah.
I would not have passed out of the test, so I didn't take it.
Because I needed to take a language test. I needed a test out of a language for one of my majors at Santa Barbara. But then the only thing was offered was Tagalog. And the only place that offered it was Irvine. So I took it there.
You took it there. Oh, so you took it at Irvine to test out. Cool. Did
I
you?
took a Tagalog class to get like A units.
So Berkeley had Tagalog.
Yeah.
Units.
And so it was
What levels?
there's intermediate and beginning and intermediate.
Oh, was that taught by Dre Barrios?
No, it was taught by Ginang G. Irma Peña Gonzalez, I believe is her last name. We call her Ginang G.
Does Gina mean teacher?
Ginang
Ginang
means Mrs.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, Ginang.
I learned that today. Thank you.
It was a fun class to take. I took it. My roommate, shout out to Sean, who is Japanese and German, took Tagalog class.
Nice.
Yeah,
Wow.
he and you know, at the end of the year you do skits and stuff, so it was kind of fun. But it was definitely a fun class, and I was, during the time I wasn't surprised it was being offered. It was more of like, oh, cool, but not knowing that it probably wasn't. Yeah, it probably wasn't offered everywhere else. I didn't know that
You're so
while I was
lucky.
taking.
I know.
I didn't get. We didn't have it at Irvine. I know some people who actually would travel to UCLA to take the class to fulfill their language requirement because you could transfer it. But like there was a student affairs person, so Anna Gonzalez. Shout out to Anna. Hi, Anna. She's a dean at Lewis and Clark University or college. She used to teach Tagalog, like, so you could be proficient enough to pass the test.
Oh, okay.
That's cool.
So that was her way of teaching, offering a Tagalog class to students. It wasn't anything for units. It wasn't anything for credit, but it was so that you could pass the test.
Yeah.
And that transitioned into the Tagalog and Filipino studies movement. So like those generation of students, like they just took that, and then like younger generations were like, we should have a class. And then that turned into the activist movement to get more Tagalog, to get Tagalog on campus and to get Filipino studies.
Nice.
Now, we left, and I believe Irvine has Tagalog now. I'm not sure, but I thought they
don't.
did. They don't? Oh, Ivy is shaking your head no. No?
Yeah.
Yes, they don't have classes at this moment. I believe a few years ago, UC Irvine was connected with UCLA doing remote classes.
So it's
but
still
not driving, but through the technology.
Oh, like
Was that taught
distance
by
learning.
Jetson? No.
I don't remember who taught
Okay.
it.
Oh, so it's still
Joy
a
Barrios
struggle.
might have helped out with that too, actually.
Okay.
So maybe through Berkeley. I can't
Okay.
remember exactly.
All right, so like they're still struggling out there in your country to get it, but I wish they had it because like my best friend took Tagalog at UCLA for her language requirement, and I was like, oh, that's cool because like she took Spanish with me, and she'd always been native speaker to Tagalog, but it's different because like even if she was a native speaker because she was born there, it's not like she really spoke Tagalog all the time. So the class like helped her, or she learned more. Granted, I don't know if she practiced it. She might. We watch teleseries together, so I'm sure it helps. Shout out to Ivy. Hi, Ivy.
So when I was in school, they had they actually taught. Well, actually, before I got to Santa Barbara, they actually taught Tagalog and Ilocano.
Oh.
So I had a
Oh.
Tagalog class and they had the Ilocano class through linguistics because the teacher was native in both, or he was an instructor in both.
Oh, that's
Carl
cool.
Rubino, I believe his name. He actually
Wow.
wrote an Ilocano dictionary. I think the only one.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
But then that was before I got there, and I think my sophomore year we started like petition. We tried to petition the East Asian Languages and Cultures Department
Yeah.
to offer Tagalog, and we're of course like shut down.
Oh,
And Santa Barbara isn't the most activist school, and there was a good number of Filipinos, but not too many. So it was we were a small number of people fighting for that. Unfortunately, we didn't have it. But when I was in graduate school up in University of Washington, they offered Tagalog.
oh, nice.
3 levels: beginning, intermediate, and advanced. And I
Did
took.
you take it?
Yeah, I took it, and
Oh, nice.
it was awesome. Gerd Domigbe was the teacher there, and he was a great teacher. Now he just he opened up a restaurant in Taiwan.
What?
Yeah, an Italian restaurant in Taiwan.
Whoa.
Yeah. So he's not teaching Tagalog anymore, but he actually was one of the best teachers I've ever had. Learned so much about Tagalog. I mean, I kind of spoke it conversationally, but he really instilled in me and taught me the grammar
Yeah.
behind it, like object, verb, and active verb.
Right.
Yeah, because language is one of
Yeah.
those things, like, if you don't learn it that way, you won't understand the real proper way to talk, right?
Yeah.
It'll all be colloquial and slangy and all that
Yeah.
stuff, yeah.
TL ako sa'yo.
Right. Even the way you write, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool. I'm glad you were able to do that.
Yeah, it was cool.
So, like, I was Asian M, you were Asian M, you wrote your thesis on AIDS in the Filipino community.
And Joe's like, what? I'm like, I know.
So, it's like, what was your favorite Asian American Studies class when you were a student?
Wow. I didn't.
Oh, you didn't take
I didn't take one. I took an ethnic studies class. I did health and culture class, and like a different kind of like different ways of looking at health based on culture in the public health department. I took a lot of medical anthropology classes and science classes more than I did ethnic studies. But I did take ethnic studies, but like really early on. I didn't take Asian Am studies at all. So
Oh, wow.
I kind of So, looking back, I'm like, I wish I did. I took a literature class that was on Asian American literature, which is actually really, really cool. But it was my freshman year. It was like one of my first classes I ever took. I don't remember too much about it, but it was more about the literature and Asian American writers. And so, we took just different literature from different Asian American writers. I think Jessica Hagedorn was one of our books. So
hi, Jessica Hagedorn, if you're listening.
Let's see. I don't know if I had a favorite per se, but I definitely had favorite instructors and whatever classes they taught.
You would take the class?
Yeah, because they were my favorite. I think Paul Spickard was like a big influence on me. Going to academia, he taught post 1965 Asian Americans. That's a great class. They did offer Filipino American studies, but every other year. So they offered a Filipino American experience. They always use the word experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, my class was called that.
Yeah. And then, you learn about the history of the Philippines and American colonization and migration here and all that stuff. It's usually the same curriculum. Usually. So they offered it my sophomore year and my senior year. I audited the class my senior year. The teacher wasn't so great, but yeah, in terms of Asian American studies, my probably favorite class was taught by Paul Spickard.
Well, ironically, both my majors, my favorite classes were taught by a pair of sisters. So Fatiba Tobing Roney was a faculty member at the time in the film studies department. So she wrote Third World Cinema. She's an Indonesian American, and then her sister Dorothy Fujita Roney taught Asian American Studies courses. So she taught Filipino, I think it was like Filipino American history or film experience. So the two of them, like their two classes, I think they greatly influenced my education because like Third World Cinema is a textbook that I still do remember to this day because Fatima Tobing Roney, she writes about how when she watched the original King Kong, like the 1930s King Kong black and white, and the natives in the movie are speaking Indonesian. So she's watching the movie and she understands and she's seeing herself viewed as the other, and that's how she's comprehending it. And I remember completely identifying with that text because as a child, I watched Operation Petticoat or something. I think that's the name of the movie, and it's about 1950. It's about World War II, and it's about like a midway ship. And there are Filipinos who get rescued by Americans, and they're all speaking Tagalog. And I remember thinking, oh, I know what they're saying. Like, this is so awesome. But at the time, I was a child, so I wasn't comprehending how they're the other, like how they're being viewed as the other. But as an adult, I was like, oh, shit. Like, that's a meaningful experience. And like, why am I placed in the other? Why am I placed as like needing to be rescued? Why am I not rescuing myself? And then when Filipinos were projected in media as like heroes, like Andres Bonifacio, or it's played by like an American. It's played by like the guy who was the actor who was Zorba the Greek. I forgot his name.
Anthony
Quinn.
Anthony Quinn.
Yeah.
Like Anthony Quinn played like, I think he played Andres Bonifacio or Emil. Something like that. I think it was
Emilio Aguinaldo?
I think it's Andres Bonifacio because there's some movie where he plays like a Filipino. And I remember I watched that going, oh, he's Filipino. And my dad's like, no, he's a white dude. He's a white dude. So like that really had an impact on me and like my perception of like being myself and whatnot. And I just remember thinking like, oh, I want to learn more about representation, and like that's what led me to it. And like at one point I thought I'd go to like visual studies, like cultural studies, like PhD. And I was like, nah, that's too much school.
Fun fact, Anthony Quinn is a Mexican American born actor.
Oh, he's
Mexican born American actor.
Oh.
Yeah, I just looked it up.
Good job.
Yeah.
So he's not a white guy,
No.
but
No.
he's not a Filipino guy.
He's not Filipino.
Yeah, so that's where I was, and that's like why I studied Asian American Studies.
Cool.
Yeah, because like it's funny. I never thought I would be really active in my Filipino club because growing up at St. Genevieve, I was surrounded by Filipinos.
Were you trying to avoid it?
And I
would you
kind
say?
of was just like, I thought I knew. Like,
Yeah.
I'm 18 and I'm like, I know about Filipinos, yo. Like, I grew up with them. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need this. And then I sit in the class and I'm like, I don't know anything. What is this?
Well, so I wish I took more of the classes, but I was taught by my peers, and I wasn't joining the Filipino clubs by choice. There are reasons why I wasn't really very social during the first couple of years. I was trying to figure out who I was and all that stuff in college, and trying to figure out how to balance like being away to going to class and finding a job and all that. Anyway, Joe's heard this story before, but some folks from Cal just kind of took me around. And one of my first friends, who's a professor now, Tracy, just started walking me around and says, "You need to meet some people." And then that's how I learned about stuff, whether it be about the just campus life and being Filipino American on campus life. And during that time, it was like a lot of talk about affirmative action. This was in 1999, right? 1999. And so just the conversations and just having that kind of avenue to learn about this was not in the classroom for me. It was more about my peers, and I will forever be grateful for that. And I think a lot of that is just, I talk about it in the sense of comfort. I was not comfortable. I was kind of like you, Elaine. I was like, I know Filipinos. I am. I grew up with them. I understand that. What am I? Who am I trying to pretend to be, or what am I trying to pose as if I pretend I don't know, or am I comfortable talking about it?
Yeah.
And so the people and my peers really gave me an avenue to be comfortable talking about my Filipino-ness, or even being able to share that with other people.
Yeah.
Was great.
I was totally opposite. I was like seeking it out when I got to college.
But you
Even
went
when I
to
was
like a white high school.
I went to a
right?
white high school. I learned about everything there is. Well, not everything, but I learned about like the history of Philippines,
Yeah.
Philippine Americans. Like when I was in high school, I kind of
You were seeking it out.
I was seeking it out already, and then all I know was when I was applying to schools, I knew I needed to go to a college that offered some kind of Filipino American resources, basically.
So UC Santa Barbara.
Well, it was actually it was a long story why I went there, but I knew it wasn't a school that didn't have anything,
Right.
So,
Right.
so I was seeking it out already when I was before that. So first Filipino club meeting, I was like, I'm there.
Right.
That's so funny. I don't think I went
Very
to
proud.
my freshman year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I avoided it.
I avoided it.
Oh.
Like my freshman year, I was like too busy like hanging out with my dorm and like hanging out with my friends. Maybe like winter quarter, I went to a Cabo meeting.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Wow.
I take it back. I think I did go to a Cabo meeting my freshman year. Because Mike, didn't you find like we were in the picture freshman year? In the yearbook, the Irvine yearbook, you saw it? Yeah, so like in the Irvine yearbook of our freshman year, Mike and I are actually in the picture together, and there are two people in between us. Like we're in the
Wow.
same row and everything, but like I don't remember Mike at all. Mike only went to the picture. He didn't go to
He
meetings.
photoshopped himself.
No, he's there. I bet he went there to check out girls. He's shaking his head yes.
My first meeting was like very, very strange. I got it was in Cal, it's PAA, Pilipino American Alliance. We had this giant meeting. I still remember it. And there was a discussion about affirmative action, and I was like, "Wait, I thought I was here to check out girls." No, but it was, looking back at it, I was like, "Okay, that's a meaningful meeting."
Yeah.
And yet, I just completely just didn't utilize it to my full advantage. I was totally there for.
Yeah, I think for me there was like
reasons.
it was a lot. Like
Yeah.
Cabo was, I don't know if it still is, but like Cabo was one of the biggest organizations on campus back then, and like there's so many people, and I remember thinking like, holy crap, like there's too many people here. I'm just gonna go back to my dorm and hang out with those folks. Like not those people in my dorm weren't all Filipino, like they were like mixed Asian, so it was fun.
Wow. I had like total opposite experiences from you guys. I was like, so they offer an award. The Filipino club at Santa Barbara is called Kapatiran Filipino, or KP. So they offer an award for the most active member. And it was called KP is My Life Award.
So you wanted that?
I wanted
Did they change it to the Joe Bernardo
Award?
I wanted all 4 years I was there. But no, there was this guy called, his name was Joe Sabado. And and he was kind of like...
Joe Sabado?
Yeah.
Is that an unusual name?
Gigante?
Because I think somebody is following me on LinkedIn.
Sabado Gigante.
Local reference.
Sorry.
Sabado Gigante for people it was a show on Spanish television that ran all day, and it's similar to like Filipino TFC variety shows.
Yeah.
It's like 8 hours and
It's like Itbulaga. But,
yeah.
but it's not local, is it? No.
I was having an international moment there.
Well, anyways, I won, I won all 4 years. I was just like so involved with everything I could in Santa Barbara. And there was no avoidance. I was always curious at like people who try to avoid those things, and I was trying to always encourage them to be involved and try to welcome
That's
them
good.
to the club. But yeah, I don't know. People just have people grew up in high school differently.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
just grew up in their first formative years differently. So obviously when they go to college and they take Filipino American Studies, or they join the Filipino club, their upbringing shapes the way they receive like the education they get.
And by the time I was like a junior, I was pretty much active, and I wanted to learn more. And it was a conscious decision for me to be able to seek that out. And I was just a little bit later than you were. I think just because of the circumstances of where I was in my life. But I chose it later, and I had the best time.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, we all go through our own development in different ways, and like I did the same thing. Like I still was a part of Kaba, but I did mostly social stuff. And then a switch flipped, and I changed, and I was like all about the community. I was the community advocacy chair, and then the external vice president. And I just remember thinking to myself when I was done, like, I can't believe I did all those things, because like in the grand scheme of things, when I first started at college, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And it's just like, oh, and then all of a sudden you're passionate about it.
finds you.
It does. Yeah, but thank you for sharing your stories about college with me.
Right on.
And with the podcast. And now we'll take a break, and then we'll talk to Ivy and Kevin. So our topic today is Filipinos in higher education, a conversation about peace studies with Ivy and Kevin. And so I'm really excited to talk about their experiences, one as a lecturer and another as a student. So starting question, what sparked your interest in peace studies or Filipino studies?
Sure, I guess I'll contribute. So I came into school as a bioengineer. My
Nice.
parents wanted me to be a doctor, and so
Of course,
I thought, I like chem. I kind of like physics. I kind of like, I guess, whatever. Let's just do bioengineering then.
Science.
Right, science. And I remember, like, first day of orientation, someone came up and said, "Oh yeah, I'm Asian American Studies major with the Filipino concentration." And I was like, "Oh, what are you gonna do with that?" Kind of like a little disparagingly, like I didn't really understand what the relevance of ethnic studies was. But I guess what sparked my interest was really getting involved with Samang Filipino, which is the Filipino cultural org at UCLA, because of the different opportunities that they offer. It was the first step for me understanding my identity as a Filipino American. And I think the more that what really sparked my interest was whenever I dove into Filipino studies, I learned so much more about myself. And every time that I dive in, it's such a transformative experience of learning more about my own history and culture. And from then on now, it's been all about Filipino studies. I love it. And from at first not wanting to ever do anything in Filipino studies and thinking that's not a viable major to becoming education court for Samahang is truly it's been a fun journey.
Awesome. Now you're like, I know what you can do with that.
Right, there's a lot.
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking skills and whatnot.
Exactly. Ivy?
For me, what sparked my interest in Filipino studies, a few experiences, including my very first Tagalog class at UC San Diego. It was still called Tagalog at the time. And also my experience studying abroad in the Philippines. But even earlier than that was my involvement with Filipino organizations at UCSD, Kaibigan Pilipino, as well as an organization, Filipino Students Saving Tagalog, also known as PST.
What? That's a real thing?
Awesome. Nice. I like that. And so why do you think we need peace studies or Filipino studies?
Well, I think one reason why we need Filipino studies is Filipinos have such a rich history, pre-colonization, post-colonization, especially as for Filipino Americans. The most we hear about Filipinos in grade school was, we killed Magellan, we were named by King Philip, and that's the only sort of understanding that we have of Filipinos. And you have an entire history, immigration history, and that's just completely erased. And I think that we're learning about so many other things, such as like imperial, so many different types of subjects that have not a lot of relevance for us as a Filipino American. It's hard for us to see why we need to study this history, because it's not really relevant to us. But there's so much that Filipinos have done and have such a large stake here in California, especially, that we deserve to learn this. This is erasing this history kind of erases ourselves as like Filipino Americans, in my opinion.
For me, I definitely do agree. I think it's important to have a relevant education for students in order to not just enjoy education more, but really to have that create and develop their critical thinking of how their own histories, like you have mentioned, have been an important part of, at least in the U.S., of Filipinos in the U.S. to contributions and experiences in general. I know that in high school, I didn't really acknowledge my Filipino side or my Filipino identity really until when I got to college, where I had these opportunities that opened my eyes, and being away from family really made me realize how also connected I was to my roots, as well as how different I was from others when I entered college. So I really think it is important to have a relevant education, like you mentioned.
Was there any kind of one moment or one moment in your kind of life or even adolescent life that you kind of realized that, Filipino studies is very important, and this is what kind of drove you to work on this? To devote part of your time to this, part of your lives to this?
For me, the moment that often replays of why I even not just pursued Filipino studies, but also ended up choosing this field is from my very first Tagalog or Filipino language class, where my instructor, Ginang Naku, said this exact phrase: if we lose our language, we will lose our culture. And that was really powerful for me. I know that now looking back, of course, there are many other factors that are part of our culture and not simply language. However, just with her saying that, and through everything I learned through her class, beyond language was so valuable to me as a second year at a university where I still felt like a minority. I was still trying to discover myself, but through that class, I was able to understand more about myself, more about my family here and also in the Philippines through cultural traits, values, and other things that I had just gone with as I was growing up. And it started to become more clear, learning different Filipino values through that class. So that specific moment and the class as a whole was really vital to me pursuing what I ended up pursuing in my undergrad.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Ivy was saying, same for me. My there's a lot of defining moments when I realized the importance of Filipino studies, but definitely it was in my Filipino 3 class with Nenita Domingo, Tita, as we like to call her. And I was learning Tagalog and I was trying to get better, and it happened when it really hit me was when I went back home and I went to my grandma, and we had a meaningful conversation for the first time. And I was able to ask her about her stories. I was able to ask about her immigration history. And this was my last grandma. My great grandma and my other grandma from my dad's side had unfortunately passed away. And so Filipino studies has really been, as I study Filipino studies, I'm really getting the opportunity to learn about myself and learn about my family history. And I think for a lot of Filipino Americans, they don't have the opportunity to know how their parents got here, how their grandparents got here, what sort of factors pushed them to get here, and what sort of responsibility does that mean for me now as a Filipino American when I dive into my history and I know, how I actually ended up in Temecula, how I ended up at UCLA.
Temecula, you grew up in Temecula?
Yep, Temecula. That's where I'm from, and studying Filipino history, and then I got to ask my parents, and I got to see these. My experience coming to Temecula wasn't just unique. It was it was influenced by immigration histories, influenced by a lot of things that we study in peace studies, and really helped contextualize my own sense of responsibility as a Filipino American.
Okay, what do your parents feel? What do your parents think about like your work as a teacher, and you're no longer a bio major, you're no longer pursuing your career as a doctor, but
right. Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, what do your parents feel about that?
I think parents and the generation gap that Filipino Americans experience is a very pressing issue. I know when I tried to change my major, the conversation, why are you changing your major? What do you think you're doing? And my brother as well, he was an engineer, switched out to psychology. He definitely paved the way for me to help me do that. But my parents, I think I'm very, very lucky to have parents who are very receptive to what I say, and they're very proud of me. I think they're proud of me in that whenever I bring it back home. And I think that's the important thing that a lot of young Filipino Americans fail to do is they'll take these classes, they'll learn a lot about their culture and identity, but when when they have that passion, there's sort of a disconnect with their parents of how does this affect you? How does this affect me as a family? So, but being able to talk to my parents openly and talk about how these issues like affect us as a family, I think has been really great conversation. So they're very supportive as long as I, make sure that I'm taking care of myself, as long as I make sure I'm going to be successful in the future, be able to be financially stable, and but they're very supportive. And I think that when you pursue Filipino studies, it opens up a wide avenue, a wide network of people that you can really talk to. And they've seen that. They've seen the hard work that I've been putting in. And they've seen a lot of direct benefits for my little sister, being able to talk with her about Filipino studies, being able to talk to her about, why are we Filipino American? How did that happen? Why are there so many here in California or even Temecula, Los Angeles and whatnot?
Yeah. Did they ever label you as like a communist activist or anything like that?
My dad has definitely said, yeah.
Like my parents labeled me, even though I'm far from it.
Did they?
Yeah,
they call you a communist activist.
Don't go to those rallies.
Right.
I totally got called activista.
Yeah.
My parents got scared when they saw my tattoo when I came back from the Philippines. It's bye-bye, and it says, makibaka wag matakot.
Nice.
And they were like, oh, makibaka wag matakot, activista ka naman.
You're like, whoops.
They're settling into it though.
Hey, at least your parents know that you have a tattoo. That's cool.
Yeah, I couldn't hide it. Unfortunately, that was a hard
Some people I
conversation.
know don't even tell their parents yet.
I know a lot of people who don't tell their parents that.
I don't have a tattoo, Mom.
Good job, Ryan.
My parents don't listen.
I mean, even with that conversation with the term activista, because of how that's seen in the Philippines, right? So that term activista, I definitely know has a different meaning for different generations, even with sororities and fraternities too in the Philippines. And to adding also to what Kevin said, I am still fortunate to have a supportive family, both my mom and my relatives, as well as my partner Charles and our daughter, would just have been so supportive throughout my education and learning more throughout the last few years. However, I had students also when I used to take Tagalog classes at UC San Diego who couldn't even tell their parents they were enrolled in that class because it wasn't a quote good enough class or a worthy class to take up units from your general education. So I had some classmates who couldn't tell their family. I think a reason why my mom has been very supportive, and also relatives, is because they have seen the direct benefits as well. One of the other experiences that I had that I don't tell a lot of people, but I know that my dad had passed away, and I know if I knew the language, we would have been a lot closer. We had a huge language barrier. Now that I look back at it, where I was able to, now I'm able to understand more of the things that he did and his characteristics, and what he was trying to express then. Now I can understand it. So I wish I knew it then, but it's also, again, because I'm able to understand my family better. My mom has seen me grow through these classes, that she has been supportive. Then I have some other colleagues, or not colleagues, but relatives who are very surprised that I teach the language, because I grew up myself not knowing how to speak the language. So to now have the opportunity to teach, I think, is probably really amusing for some relatives, but others have been really proud too.
In a way, you kind of have to be an activist, though, to do this work, right? In order for Filipino studies and for Tagalog to be institutionalized in our, in our institutions of education, we have to be active. We have to rock the boat.
Like, do either of you, because it seems like for you all, and for my experience, like I didn't take Filipino studies classes until college, but it was because I didn't have the opportunity to take them until college. Like, do you, with this work, do you wish that these types of courses were in your elementary education or like in high school?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that these courses should be taught K through 12. For a young Filipino American to see themselves, their people, like represented in literature, and to learn about that, I think is hugely important. Especially with Governor Jerry Brown just signing that new ethnic studies bill. I think we're at a very, very very key place in time where we need to be able to advocate for Filipino studies to be included in California history education, especially because we're one of the largest Asian American populations here in California. We need to know more than just Magellan. We need to know more than King Philip. We need to know more than just, we kind of fought in the war and now somehow there's a bunch of Filipinos here and we have no idea how that happened. Yeah. I think that if you do introduce these sort of things, Filipino Americans will have such a better understanding of their own sense of identity and place here. And I think starting those conversations earlier, it would help throughout the entire education process up until college, or whether or not they decide to go to college.
Yeah.
Right. And even touching upon your previous episodes too, and your topics, I really have enjoyed listening to when you talked about mental health, even gangs that youth would get into because of not finding a sense of place in an institution, for example. So finding that somewhere else. I really do feel that having this institutionalized in a K-12 setting earlier than college would be very significant for our communities, because like what Ryan was mentioning earlier, it kind of was odd to talk about if there is no conversation starter or something like that in any setting. So to have it even normalized in a institution, I think makes those conversations less awkward, because if other people know that their children are taking this type of class, I feel that connection might be easier, although I think it will take a while for us to get there. I would hope for these classes to be institutionalized. I know that some places do have this within the K-12 setting. And just in general, when it is in that setting, there's a different status that comes to these classes, because you're literally printed not printed. We don't have catalogs anymore, right? We're all
it's all online.
Yeah, just letting you know. But online courses, like we can see ourselves in writing, I think is a big deal for students and parents to know, wow, your school actually values this language or this class, to give you credit for it. And K-12, especially when it's in public education, and students don't necessarily have to pay extra to take those classes, I think we need it.
To bring it back to Kevin. So, Kevin, you are the inaugural RA for the Filipino floor, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
How did that floor come about?
So as I was talking to Ivy before the podcast, it came from, a lot was centered about my experience as a first-year Filipino, lived in Temecula for the first 18 years of his life, and then all of a sudden moves to the big city of LA. Back then, my first fall quarter at UCLA, I was pretty lost. It's easy to say that the jump from high school to college is enormous, and it's overwhelming to go from a class of like 30, 40 to a class of 200, 300 people where people are sitting on the floor, can't find a seat. So I was very shaken. I was scared. I didn't have a lot of community. And it wasn't until I got connected to Samahang Filipino through through its associated dance organization, Samahang Modern, which they have a partnership. And through getting involved with Samahang Modern, I started to feel that sense of community.
Okay.
So that the Filipino floor was really inspired by this idea that, hey, a lot of Filipinos come to UCLA with such a variety of different community conditions. A lot of us are, first generation students, 1.5 generation students, first to go to college and whatnot. And I think that having a space where they can feel safe, where they can explore their identity, and they have a place that they can come back to.
So did the students request this? So how did that floor even come about?
So how that happened was UCLA Residential Life has a process, or they have a learning living communities. So around a number of different learning living communities that are dedicated to exploring an academic interest.
Okay.
So I was like, hey, I'm going to try to be an RA next year. Why not try to create this Filipino floor?
Oh, so you did the RA application process and the whole thing, and then you're like, I'm going to suggest a Filipino floor.
It was actually the other way around. So I suggested the Filipino floor, not knowing whether or not I'd become an RA. And then later that year, I applied to be an RA and then got placed as the RA.
That's awesome.
So this is first in the nation, though, right? Like there hasn't been anything like it.
Do you know?
I don't know.
As far as I've heard so far, I haven't heard of anything
SF
else.
State or Long Beach.
I don't know, because
I'd have to check SF State or Long Beach. Or
I bring that up because I have an RA background myself. I was one of the last house assistants at UC Irvine in a housing complex called Arroyo Vista, and there was an Asian American Studies themed house, and so I was one of the house assistants there, and that house, it was academic themed, and it consisted of Asian American Studies majors and minors. I was a major myself. And I just remember there's different programming that you had to do, like social and whatnot. So what do you have planned for your students? Because not all of them how did that work? Did they sign up? Did they know that it's going to be the Filipino floor? So what are your expectations? What are your programs that you plan?
So for the floor of around 90 folks, around 30 of them opted in to being the Filipino floor.
Okay.
So, we have an entire floor of 90 people, and then 30 of them, it houses 30 of the people that opted in the living learning community for the Filipino floor.
Awesome.
And I think our engagement model is really based on the students. And I think you're never going to invest folks unless it comes from them. Empowerment isn't going to come from me as an RA. Learning about Filipino culture and identity isn't going to come from. I'm not going to push it onto you as an RA. I really want to. It starts from the self. And so a lot of our programming, we have some stuff planned, definitely to engage them and to ask the questions and get them to start asking the questions. And from there, my co-RA and I really hope to provide programming that lets them explore the avenues that they want to. So hopefully it's very, very student-centered. But we do have a couple things planned. One example thing is this October for Filipino American History Month to celebrate the inauguration, as well as a couple anniversaries for our Alumni Association and Samahang Filipino. We're hosting a gala with 200 Filipino alumni and then the 100 undergraduates. So just really celebrate this really momentous occasion, as well as raise money for a scholarship.
Awesome.
But among those things, a lot of it is really try to create that space first. I think before we jump into programming, you really have to establish a safe community where people have the opportunity to say what they want.
Are you going to bring your residents to FPAC this year?
That is certainly a goal.
Okay.
And through Samahang Filipino, we do have some plans to go there as well.
FPAC is the Festival of Philippine Arts and Culture. It takes place on Saturday, October 8th from 11 to 7 p.m.
Nice
that's
plug.
a plug.
It's a great plug right there.
Thanks.
Plug.
Plug.
Wait, so when the Filipino Hall was first introduced to UCLA, there was no resistance or no kind of pushback?
The pushback that we got, I decided to try to pursue this a little late in the game. So the pushback was we might not have enough time to establish the floor. But otherwise, the interest that I had showed and my co-RA and as well as the student side I had outreach to, because there had to be a vested interest with at least, X amount of Filipino students that wanted to be a part of this.
I mean the incoming students.
At the time, I outreached to the first years
and
said, hey, would you all be interested?
Because at UCLA, you get guaranteed housing for your first 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I had outreach to the first year class.
I worked there, by the way. That's why.
Go Braves. But yeah, I had outreach to them and asked them if they were interested in being a part of this, and that's kind of how it moved forward. But definitely the question that I get asked a lot when I talk about this, which is why I think these sort of spaces need to exist, and why a strong narrative and voice for these spaces need to exist, is because I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm the RA of the Filipino floor, and the first question I'd get a lot of times, especially from folks that aren't people of color, don't understand these sort of issues, they'd be like, oh, isn't that reverse discrimination? Aren't you just resegregating, whatnot? And I was
roll the eyes.
Right. And I was like, first of all,
is there a rainbow floor for LGBTQ?
Yeah, there's an LGBT one. There's an African diaspora floor, Chicana studies floor.
Yeah. So
but when I talk to folks outside of that don't see that as normal, they would be asking oh, why do you need this? And I'm like, it's first of all, it's inclusive to anyone who wants to learn about Filipino.
You don't
culture
need to be Filipino to live there.
Yeah, exactly. That would be very much discrimination.
Yeah.
But there's a strong narrative, or there's a strong pushback of why these safe spaces need to exist. University of Chicago was safe spaces are under attack. We don't think shouldn't have trigger warnings, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there should be a strong narrative of why these sort of spaces for folks to explore their own identity to exist. There should be. There should be a space for us to be able to ask those hard questions, for us to develop our own sense and voice as a Filipino American youth. I think that's something that's really lacking right now.
I'm feeling all warm fuzzies because I'm remembering my res life training and it was moving. So you're probably so tired. So I'm so thank you for being
Big
here.
Smiles every day.
Smile all the time, living in a fishbowl. But it's just been the first week. It's okay.
Yeah. School hasn't even started.
Still hasn't started. If you need to cry, I'll give you my card. You can come by my office.
I appreciate that. Definitely.
But it's really cool that you have that at UCLA, and it's probably the first in the nation. Yeah. And but then I always think of all the other schools that don't have the same resources.
Yeah, we're really lucky.
And the history of activism and Filipino community at UCLA.
Kevin's lucky. UCLA has such a big background in Asian American studies. When I was at Irvine, there's a long history of Asian American studies there as well. And so that's why the students had demanded that we should have a house. But the sad part is 2 years later, the Asian Am Studies house no longer exists.
Yeah.
It was hard to get students to live there because to be in that house, you had to be an Asian American Studies or major or minor. And when I was there, I may have been the sole major there as the HA, the house assistant. Everybody else was a minor. So that's another, it's a continual struggle with defining and rationalizing why Asian American or ethnic studies needs to exist. So I give you so much props for doing this work. Yeah. It's really hard work.
What about Cal? I know there's a long history of activism there, and there's a long history of trying to get Filipino studies and Tagalog and everything at Cal. It just seems like the institution is not very supportive. And also Santa Barbara, where I went, where there's not a lot of people of color there, but still it was just a struggle constantly to get these get our spaces in those institutions.
To create space.
Yeah.
I think you were probably there in Cal back in the early 2000s, Joe, when there was a big push to get a Filipino American Studies teacher.
Yeah, professor.
A professor.
No, it's Catherine Siniza Choi.
Yeah, and she wrote.
Shout out to her if she ever listens.
Yeah, Empire of Care, right?
Yes.
Empire of Care is the book that she wrote, and that was a statement. We're as a group of activists, Filipino American activists in Berkeley.
It's not a bad word.
It's not. It's
but
not
to our parents, it's a bad word.
They just want you to be safe, Joe.
I know.
So, that's true. But it took a lot of energy to just get that conversation going and let people know that this is something that we wanted. And we put a symposium together. We invited a ton of people.
Yeah,
I think
that.
from the Philippines, just to speak about it and to speak about not just the want, but the need. We wanted it, but we also felt like we needed it. We interviewed different professors as a group, as students. It was really empowering. It was probably something I remember the most. But I think you were probably there.
Yeah, I was there.
We had
I
a
was there.
state.
There was a lot of panel discussions and stuff like that. And
That sounds really long. And
It was
I
like
remember
a
Rex
whole entire
Navarrete
day.
was there.
Rex was
Yeah.
there.
that sounds fun.
and of course, like Allison Tinchanco Cubales,
Yep.
Don Mabalan were there. And like some
All of
our-
these names that sound
Great
familiar,
names.
but I've been
Yeah,
like so far
veteranos.
removed from peace studies and Asian American studies since
Yeah.
grad school and undergrad.
But then, how do you get it at a place like Long Beach, where it has a huge Filipino population, probably one of the largest in the country.
Yeah,
in the
like
state.
how does that
But-
work? Because it sounded like we're friends on Facebook with Ivy, and like you were putting it out there, like
Yeah.
advertising your class, like make sure that this class doesn't get canceled. So like, how does that work? Like with
Yeah, I mean, what's the kind of climate there, and is there a need there, and what do the students feel about these? I mean, places like UCLA and SF State always will constantly have, people like Kevin advocating. But what about these other schools that don't have as much student involvement?
So at Long Beach, I could speak from my experience within the 2 years I've been there. So just within those 2 years, what I have noticed is the reason why we actually have it is really because of course, student interest and demand, as well as faculty and admin support. If you don't have both of those, you can't have a viable program, or something like what I would see at UCSD in my undergrad days is what I heard from my faculty there. Some students who develop this desire to want to push for Filipino studies would be in their third or fourth year and almost on their way out. And then by that time, the petition or anything would almost go through. These individuals would graduate, and it seems that this faculty would see the start over again.
Right.
So it is important when there is a student movement for it to be a movement including students of all levels, especially those who will be there when these classes are finally established. So far, I've seen a class like our first intermediate Filipino class from when it was first proposed to the end of it, and it does take a few years to get
Totally.
developed, and depending again on who's working on the course proposal for the class. So from what I've seen, I definitely don't want to also put the responsibility completely on the students, because for the case of our 201 intermediate class that I was pushing for to save, I also do realize that the time that it was scheduled was not the ideal time for students, because it conflicted with one of the student organizations' general meeting weekly.
Oh, that's
So
a
that was
bummer.
something that we were actually trying to avoid even before, but depending on, I don't want to say it's politics, but just depending on where our classes are placed may determine which students can now take that class. So even though there is interest, I still believe that even though students aren't enrolled in that class, that there is still interest. At the same time, I do believe that when there is a class, I have seen other students who've dropped other classes to save this one class to make sure that the university does see there is a demand. So there's students who go completely out of their way talking to their advisor, justifying the need, why they need to take this Filipino language class for their major, even though they're above units, for example. So it really varies from the students. But Dr. Linda Maram has been integral in having this established at Cal State Long Beach. If she wasn't there to propose these classes before I even got to the university, then there wouldn't be opportunities for lecturers as myself and also for other students. So definitely, along with students, it's faculty and admin support too.
But then something like Tagalog is or Filipino is it's hard enough to get parents to teach it to their kids, right? And it's and then there's all these kind of Tagalog schools or Filipino schools, and sometimes some of them, not all, but some have been hard up on trying to get enrollment in those places. Do you feel that it's better to institutionalize Filipino as a language within American education, or have create offshoot classes like Filipino school or whatnot? Like, what would be the advantages of making it institutionalized?
Okay. I'm glad you asked me that way, because if I had to choose, I really wouldn't know what is better, what is more advantageous than the other. But the benefits of having it institutionalized is that students can actually get credit for these classes, get units. So their tuition is really going towards classes that they enjoy, that we assume that they enjoy, that are culturally relevant to these individuals. So again, it brings that status to Filipino studies, as well as it shows the parents, it shows the students that it's important enough to get units for what you're learning. So we give you that. That's a huge advantage, because it will get them towards where they are in college in the first place, to graduate, to use it in the real world. And then the other advantages, though, also for the more offshoot, as you phrased it, opportunities that are coming out, is it can often have quicker results, in that if you can conceptualize an idea, you can start doing it as soon as you're able to find some students to teach, a venue to have your classes, whether it's a few students or it is a full class. Wonderful opportunities such as the Filipino Cultural School in Cerritos area, Bahay Kubo here in San Fernando Valley. There's also the one in Pasadena, Tagalog Kids. I have a friend who's doing Skype sessions. There's just so many that I feel that that are out there that I admire, and they are just as important, and they get quicker results. So I still think that we need both of them, but we should not be complacent, or we should not settle for the quote offshoot examples. They are very valuable, but if we keep on I like to call, if we keep on filling the gap for these institutions will not then offer these classes for us, because then we're satisfied with what's happening in the community, and then we're not pushing for it. I know that's generally speaking, and every university is different, but I do want to also I do think it's important that students continue to fight for the classes. As a lecturer and faculty, I have to also be cautious, because I want it to be clear that I'm not fighting to save my job. So it's always, I want to remind my students too, that if this class gets dropped, they'll give me another course because of union standards, union backgrounds, fortunately. But I specifically love focusing on Filipino language, and I would love to teach this course. So it really does have to come from the students.
Okay. Well, sorry, I had a quick question. So if you had a conversation with a parent, and you want your kids to enroll them in whatever, in Tagalog school or one of your classes or something, what would be your pitch?
For a college level student?
Well, let's start out with elementary school.
Elementary school student.
So the parents still are still in charge of their lives.
So that's a great question, and I would also be dependent if I had more information on if that family recently arrived from the Philippines, or if they were have students who were born and raised here. If the students were born and raised here in America, specifically in California, I would say that learning a second language, now we see all these studies that show that learning a second language has all of these benefits, like delaying the onset of Alzheimer's. I know we can't even, maybe they won't be worried about something like that. But it would make the students understand themselves more, even potentially prevent family conflict when the language is shared and at least understood. So if it's closer towards high school and then high school to college, I could probably pitch them the benefit of this could in the future fulfill their foreign or world language requirement. So if they start this now, they'll save more money when they get to college because they're fulfilling their required languages now, because I feel that parents want to make sure that their students aren't quote falling behind by taking these classes.
I had a similar question to Kevin. So Kevin, imagine I am a bio student at UCLA and I don't have time to take all these extra classes. What would be your pitch to me?
Ooh, what a great question.
Because I know you get that, right?
yeah. And I think the pitch for college students, if there is someone, and I think this is kind of like lending to the idea why it's important that it needs to be institutionalized, is I would try to, if they don't have the space to take an extra class, which I didn't as a bioengineer, there was no way I was going to take any foreign language, Asian American studies course.
They have fewer GEs than college learners and science
it's
students.
Less than 5 or 7 GEs.
So that's why I'm I'm glad you're not a bioengineer anymore.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't be able to take any courses. Just be studying all the time. But for students, say if you're in a biology student, and why it lends to the importance of having these classes institutionalized is it gives it some sense of credibility. If you can fulfill your, XYZ general education requirements, if you can fulfill your foreign language requirement, or if some Tagalog and you can get into Tagalog 2 or Filipino 2 instead of starting from the beginning, you can save money. We did a survey at UCLA last year for our campaign for Filipino studies. We sent a survey to around 200 Filipino students at UCLA, asked them about just various questions about their academic positioning, their goals and whatnot. And we found that Filipinos are a lot more likely to take classes if, number one, they know they exist, because for some reason Filipinos just don't know that there's so many classes that cover Filipino culture identity, even outside of the Asian American Studies program. Number two, they have to have an interest. There has to be some sort of way that these classes are relevant.
So if it was Asian Filipino Americans in hip hop, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I would take that class."
Yeah, I mean,
shout out to Mark Viegas.
Right.
I mean, because there are classes at UCLA. This is a real class. It's history of EDM. That's an actual class on the books at UCLA. So that's if the students want it, they can create it.
Definitely. And I think the most important thing that lends to Filipino Americans taking these classes is, does it fulfill a requirement?
Totally.
Does it save me money? Does it fulfill a requirement? And for example, we just finally for UCLA have the UCLA diversity requirement in the College of Letters and Sciences passed, I think last year, one of the last UCs to have a diversity
that's
requirement.
crazy.
Crazy, right?
I
had
for
it at
UCLA,
Irvine.
We had it at Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Santa Barbara of all places.
Did you have one, Ryan?
I don't know.
Oh,
I think Cal has one too.
terrible.
Right?
But Ryan was busy looking at girls.
We can edit that.
And what's interesting is that a lot of the Filipino courses that are offered, first of all, they don't take care of a lot of the general education requirements because they're quote unquote too specific.
Yeah.
And secondly,
That's such bullshit.
they don't count for the diversity requirement, which makes me confused. Why?
They totally should.
Which they should, and it's a matter of students letting the professors know, hey, can you make sure you petition your class, your syllabus to be counted for the diversity
So the Asian American
requirement.
Studies department has to put that work in then to petition that class at UCLA.
Okay.
Yeah, to fulfill because the diversity requirement is very new. It is just been approved.
So there's a lot of classes that haven't been considered yet.
Yeah.
But that is, for example, one great way to incentivize students to take it.
Yeah.
Hey, it counts for a requirement, counts for upper div credit. You should take it. And if there's a slight interest in it, then, I feel like once you open the door to Filipino studies, once students start talking about it, at least that was for me. Once I started to get into it, that's when it generated more interest. It was very reciprocal. It's very chicken versus egg.
Totally.
Do we have to establish a class and then outreach, or do we need to generate the interest and then establish a class? And it's a hard balance, in my opinion.
I really think it's fascinating that the conversations that you're having with students, these are conversations that I had 15 years ago when I was an undergrad, when Mike and I were undergrads at Irvine. I mean, talking about being an activista, there was an organization at the time called Tagalog and Filipino Studies. It's called TAPS. And side note, I created the acronym for that. Yeah.
Nice. We studied that in Samang Filipino.
Oh my God, you studied it so
We're
long.
we're doing research on like
What?
the history of Filipino studies, and we're like, TAPS, what is this? They tried to
Oh
say
wow,
Filipino studies.
hala. It was
Learn
a
the
fourth
history
year
books.
though, so it's totally that track that you're talking about
Yeah.
of students graduating and leaving.
Yeah.
So that by the time I left, I was like, well, peace out. I hope one of you second years can
Right, go
figure
take
it
it
out
over.
because
Yeah.
I'm gone.
And that's the difficulty. That's very
But
difficult.
yeah, so like those conversations that you're having, like we had them 15 years ago,
Yeah.
and then like probably 20 years before, like Rose and Florante Ibanez were having the same conversations. Shout out to Rose and Florante Ibanez, founders of UCI Kababayan, about Tagalog and Filipino studies at Irvine. Like
Yeah.
it's a continuous conversation, and we're always trying to justify why we need to learn about our own history and our own self.
Yeah.
And I would like to say that in my lifetime, we'll get to a point where we don't need to justify that. We get to learn about our
Yeah.
history. PhD in history, Joe Bernardo.
Dr. Joe.
Dr. Joe
But
Bernardo.
what's funny is like we still having these conversations, but like
Yeah.
there are like 10 times more Filipino American scholars than there
Yeah.
were back then, and they're still not being quote unquote validated in
By like general
By- yeah.
academia.
by general academia. It sucks.
So it's like we're still like. So what are you saying? Like the issues that our parents had as accountants and trying to be validated by like a firm, like is the same issues that a Filipino American in academia will have by an institution? That's like a really hard question. Sorry, James.
Oh,
Big question there.
well, I mean, there's always that
The
kind of-
politics.
the
of
politics of
academia.
yeah, and then once there is like one Filipino American scholar in the Asian American Studies department, people are like, okay, that's all. We don't need
Like,
any more.
done. There's
We're
your
done.
token.
We checked.
We got our
checked it off the
one.
list.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah. And then just in ethnic studies is an attack in general.
Yeah, all
in
the
higher
time.
education all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, you had it at SF State.
State.
Like, yeah,
The
and that's the
that's like the-
birthplace.
place
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the birthplace of ethnic studies, and they're still struggling to keep it alive. It's horrible. But yeah,
So hey, high school students, go into ethnic studies. It's
Be
a valuable.
activistas.
yeah.
It's a valuable. You learn critical thinking.
Okay. Here's another question. We talked about putting it through K through 12, and there are like organizations that try to do it, like PEP in SF State, right?
There's something in
They're
San
doing
Diego.
amazing.
There's they
Yeah.
do stuff in San Diego,
Diego.
but that's like more language based.
I've
Like all
never
the-
heard of a Tagalog school in LA.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Maybe like the school.
the
Well,
one at
you taught
Cerritos,
Tagalog
there's
at
one that
SIPA for a little bit, right, Ryan?
like the ones that Ivy mentioned earlier.
And then there's ones you.
One
Yeah.
Filipino school in San Diego, though, is taught by Filipino language teachers, credentialed teachers often, and also retired teachers in San Diego. But I believe they don't offer credit. So it still is.
It's very much like you need to learn for the love of learning.
Correct. So it still is an informal or non education.
Well, it's cultural, right? Like Chinese, like I had Chinese friends, Taiwanese friends, like they went to Chinese school every weekend to learn language.
Yeah.
And it was just like inherent, like you just did it. Like there was no questions.
Yeah.
But Filipinos, we don't have that.
Yeah. Well, it's the history of colonization.
Yeah.
Yeah. We trying to be American.
Colonization.
Summed it up in a few words.
3 words.
Well, I mean, so my question
History
is,
of colonization.
My favorite.
but then a place like a Catholic school, tons of Filipinos, like St. Genevieve,
Yeah.
right? Or some other ones out there, right?
St. Genevieve.
Bishop Amman, West Covina, or like Loyola. Kind
That's
of,
not-
right?
Kind
nah.
of. There's like
No.
There's a few. There's a handful. at
8%.
least.
Yeah, there's a few of us,
How did it get it institutionalized there? I mean, you kind of had the.
It's
we've seen-
institutionalized there?
No, how do you get it institutionalized?
I see.
Oh, how?
Because at least in LAUSD, there's not a lot of, at least my observations, a lot of parents kind of put them in the Catholic school or private school
Yeah.
because LAUSD has a really bad reputation, especially like in the Valley or something.
Yeah.
But then so you have a lot of Filipino kids going to like
Private
St. Jan,
schools.
private schools.
For the Catholic.
How do you get ethnic studies?
I don't. That's a
institutions
good
there?
question.
Yeah.
Hey, cousin who works there, how do you get it there? But like, yeah, I mean, go.
I think with private schools that there is more leeway in the sense that not all teachers there need to have credentials. So I say that because there could be opportunities for that. I actually approached a Catholic school that won't be mentioned informally, asking how if they would be interested in having a Filipino or Tagalog class. And I really think it depends on the timing of when. I mean, we're talking about how this conversation continues over and over, but it really depends too on the timing. Are people at the right place at the right time? Not just students, not just faculty, but even admin. Those admin who are creating the general education requirements, who made that diversity requirement, the admin who's going to approve a petition to say, okay, you can take that class that is diverse, or the admin who said that you need to be an Asian American studies major or minor before you can live in the living in the house. What if they're exploring? So I think that also reminds people who are listening that you don't necessarily have to go in the education field as an educator to continue to support Filipino studies. There are so many different ways that you can encourage and help this happen. So for a K-12 school, CSET Filipino is a credential subject where students can be qualified. And there have been several schools within the LAUSD area who have been interested. But their second request is, we want a teacher who can teach Filipino and another subject. And I don't know if that's the same with a private school, because for lack of better words, they get more bang for their buck if they have someone who can teach more than one subject. So after school program, I think what is probably easier for
and even if you're at a private school, though, like the school, like a parochial school, is beholden to the curriculum of the Catholic education.
There's still a curriculum.
There's still a curriculum you have to follow.
Yeah. I mean, there's also after school programs like the one in Stockton,
it's hard.
Little Manila.
Like after school, like kids are in sports. Or they're doing
just competition
And
with a whole
it's kind of
bunch.
like daycare too.
And that's why there are also schools that if there's right faculty there, even if they don't teach that subject, but they see that it is important for Filipinos to gather. For example, Stephen White Middle School had a Filipino club because there was an interest there from a faculty to, an advisor there, and also a psychologist at the time to start those. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a class. It would be great. But even if we create these safe spaces within lunchtime, I think it's important.
Okay, so I know we're being cognizant of time. So one final question. Let's make it a good one. All right. Let's say...
What's your favorite color?
Dude, we'll edit that
Red.
out. We'll edit that out. Just kidding. We'll keep it, baby. But final question. It's not really a question, but I think it's like, if you got to give an elevator pitch as to why you believe in what you're doing, like why you believe in peace studies, why you believe in Tagalog studies, give that pitch, like not to a parent, but to a student. So Kevin, as a fellow student, and Ivy as an instructor that you would be giving to a student, like give us your elevator pitch. Sell us on why peace studies and Tagalog studies, I should be taking them. I know it's hard. Sorry.
Definitely no. That's a great question, and as you asked that, and I was just thinking, my heart just started beating fast, just thinking about, the times of when I've had such great insight, and so what I would say. So if there's any Filipino Americans out there who's listening, any ones in college or K through 12, you're listening out there. Here's my plea. Here's my story for you. Studying about Filipino history and culture, for me personally, has been a transformative experience. I came to UCLA, again, a bioengineering major, thought that I wanted to become a doctor, thought that like I just needed to get a job, get my education, get out, and live my life, achieve that American dream that all of our, my parents and a lot of immigrant families want for their kids. And, I think when you learn about Filipino studies, or when I did, it was such a transformative experience for me. Like I not only was, I was in a major that I knew I really didn't want to be interested in, knew that like that wasn't for me.
You weren't passionate about it.
And I wasn't passionate about it. And, a lot of it was external factors from, I really believe you can't be what you can't see. And for me, I didn't see anything else outside of my path except, you're just going to become a doctor. You're going to get out of your house. You're going to live your life, get married, have kids and whatnot. But through taking Filipino studies, I have learned so much more about myself, and it's been a transformative experience. And I think really as well, you really reframe the purpose of an education. And in America, I feel like the American culture's purpose of an education is to get money, is to get rich, is to be successful. But through taking Filipino studies, you really get a strong center foundation of, what does this education mean to you? What does it mean to the people that you left back home? And Filipino studies really taught me that, as a person is privileged enough to go to UCLA, as a person who has the opportunity to explore my identity culture, that I have such a responsibility to my home. I have a responsibility to my sister. I have a responsibility to my family. I have a responsibility to that they see that I'm successful, that they see that I'm successful outside of the definition of what it means to be, or the American definition of what is success, And my education really is not just for myself at this point, but through Filipino studies and through this transformative process of continuously learning about myself. And, unlearning is just as important as learning, right? Unlearning a lot of the things from colonial mentality, colonization, and replacing that with, understanding this amazing, beautiful culture and people that we have as Filipinos and Filipino Americans. I have a responsibility now to bring that knowledge back to my community. I have that responsibility to bring it to the kids of Temecula who, are getting involved in, who are lost and who don't really have that understanding of Filipino culture outside of, we're just going to go to church and talk amongst ourselves as a youth while our parents are chatting chismosa and whatnot. So that's personally what I would say is that you will learn so much about yourself. And, through going through Filipino studies, through understanding your own personal history, it helps, again, contextualize who you really are, what you're passionate about, and how you can best serve yourself, how you can best demonstrate your success for yourself, for your family, for your parents. And I think that's the most valuable thing from Filipino studies, for me at least.
That's awesome.
You're inspiring.
Inspiring. And
Sorry, real quick before. So what's next for you, Kevin?
What's next? Oh, what a great question. I think a great thing about the degree I have, if I could do it again, I would have double majored in Asian American Studies, Filipino concentration, and statistics. But, what's next for me? It's going to graduate, hopefully graduate within 4 years. It's been a long, hard journey, and I'm ready to really embrace the world. And
I love it.
I think an important thing,
energy,
right? I think that an important thing that I think a lot of young Filipino Americans have is like they're so set on a destination. They're so set on where they have to go, but one of my favorite quotes from like Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And I know for me, like I've had a lot of experiences being able to intern. Yeah, I know. It's so great. There's so many great things there. And for me, it's not necessarily about the destination. Like I know I can probably get involved in the public service. I know I can probably get involved, just say, oh, I'm just going to go into statistics. I'm going to make a lot of money, get into like data science and whatnot. But for me, it's not about the destination. It's about the direction. And I know I don't necessarily have a destination right now, but I have a compass. I have a direction. And I have a passion that really centers myself in what I want to do. And I think that's the beauty about Filipino studies is that it helps generate interest. It helps generate passion so that when all these waves come at you as a college student, grades, school, etc., family, when you have that centered understanding of self, when your bedrock is your understanding of yourself, your understanding of your community and positioning in society, it really helps pave the way forward and, really tackling the world as a fearless Filipino American. So I have no idea what I'm going to do after my postgrad, but I know that I have this really strong passion and I have this strong direction and I'm excited. And we'll see. Maybe I'll let you all know in a year. Hopefully I'll,
Elaine wants to hug you and adopt you.
Oh my God. I want you to be my brother. You're so cute. I love it. So passionate. He's not been brought down by bitterness in the world.
It happens though, but it happens. It's true. You can
persevere.
You be so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
I hope so. I hope I can continue this energy.
15 years from now, you'll start a podcast.
We might do some Facebook Live broadcasts for our floor, Filipino Food Friday.
Do you want to get? I would totally. I'm on campus, so if you want like someone to come hang out,
I can swipe you if you'd like.
Oh my God, free meals.
UCLA dining, number 2 in the country.
Reber, the Asian dining hall, is bomb.
They have really good
It is
lechon.
so good.
The
I've never
lechon
been
is
to
amazing.
Filipino night.
Yeah.
I've only been
Yeah.
on Korean night, and believe me, Korean night was excellent.
Wow.
Okay, so we're doing that.
So we're gonna go.
So we're-
Filipino
I
night.
have a lot of swipes, so if y'all want to come, like, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Hey, if you program pitch,
Okay, let's hear it.
if you want this Filipino American Life to come to your hall, to your campus,
That would be cool.
That'd be cool.
I think we would totally go.
We would totally do
We would
it.
totally go.
Ryan's
and if you
gonna perv on college girl.
Hey.
Can you please edit that? That is not cool, Joe.
not cool,
Off the
Joe.
record.
If it's true, but not cool. But
We'll
I'm
edit
just
that out,
saying,
don't worry.
pitch. Like we'll come, we'll talk podcast, and you swipe us into Reber and eat delicious
yes.
food.
Yes,
Definitely.
Okay.
I'd love for y'all to meet the kids.
I would love to meet them.
Yay.
And if they want to
Yeah.
be Ed Studies minor students, I am the counselor that handles Ed Studies minor.
Yes,
There you go.
education.
Holla.
Love it. I love
Connections.
it. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. It's all good. And Ivy, your turn now.
Pitch
It
to
would have been
students.
a wonderful way to end. Kevin has been so inspiring. I think as we listen to him, we are reminded of how we felt
I
when we
know.
graduated. But you are so much more eloquent.
Yes.
You are.
A lot of us.
Don't get your PhD though.
Way to kill his dreams, Joe.
I'm kidding.
Wherever you go, they're going to be very lucky to have you. Whatever field it is, continue to push and be an ally or
Yes.
be in the movement
Yes.
for Filipino studies. For me, for a specific, so I'll gear it specifically to Tagalog or Filipino studies. I think Kevin did a wonderful job explaining it for peace studies as a whole. But for the Tagalog Filipino studies, I would remind people if they don't already know, and some are shocked that Tagalog, as it's listed in the census, is actually the third most common non-English language in the entire United States, as well as in California, as well as in Los Angeles County. And I think knowing that and seeing how high it is, one could wonder why don't we have these classes then in the educational system? But reminding students that it's high. We have the statistics and we're up there in terms of demographics. However, we do need these opportunities to learn about self, but also learn how to use this language in a community, in a environment where we can use this language to connect. I tell my students all the time, even if you don't become fluent, which you probably won't just taking a semester of the class, but you have now tools, you have some conversation starters that you can use in the workplace, you can use when you go to whatever, try not to stereotype, so whatever business it is, or whatever everyday life activity it
Or
Oh,
when you're
is.
hospitalized.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I immediately jumped to
know?
hospital. The nurse will help me.
I really think my family is able to pass visiting hours because of all of the Filipino
Oh, of
nurses.
course.
Oh,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah, yeah.
Totally. We
the
bribe them
baon
with
they
food. Yes.
Yes,
see?
and they
Bribe with
some
food.
of them sell food. So I went.
What?
No, I was at the hospital like late night, and sorry, I'm totally interrupting, but I was at a hospital late night, and the Filipino nurses were selling like embutido to other fellow Filipino nurses.
Yeah.
So we bought one. It's cool.
And exactly that, like that. Also, so that conversation, even saying a greeting to another person, they may correct you and say, "I don't speak Tagalog," or they may speak another one of the 170 plus languages in the Philippines. However, it's important to have those tools as we navigate this world wherever it is. To again use that to build a shared community with someone else, and for. In the Philippines, actually, because you had kind of mentioned it earlier with a significant moment, I just remembered I love talking to any person there of any level, no status. And I talked to one of the drivers when I was at a meeting in the Philippines. He was off to the side. I told him what I was doing when I was studying abroad there. And he said, it's inspiring to know that there are Filipinos abroad outside of the Philippines who want to learn the language and want to study Filipino
cool.
culture. So as for his role as a driver, he saw that to be, why are you here? You're already in America. Why would you even come back here? So he saw that as, again, that opportunity to have a conversation with him, also just to inspire him. And we build that community for that brief moment. So I enjoyed it. I'm so inspired by you, Kevin. I know everyone else is.
I know.
Yep.
So I guess that's it for now. Thank you again.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ivy. Thank you,
Yay.
Kevin, for being here.
Of course, it was a pleasure.
This was really informative. I'm so happy that you are continuing to do the work on both ends as a student and as an instructor. And I can't wait to share this podcast with everybody.
Agree.
Yeah.
Do you have any plugs?
Do you have any plugs?
Let's see.
You can talk about the gala.
Oh yeah,
What's the date for
so
that?
the gala happening October 15th. We're trying to raise a scholarship or an endowment money for a sustainable scholarship for each of the for Filipino undergraduate Filipino students. Another plug-in is I've been
What's
interning.
the name of the scholarship part? Sorry.
It's the Lowell Sevilla scholarship.
Lavelle Sevilla.
Yeah, Lavelle Sevilla. Thank you.
She was my friend, so I just wanted you to say that.
Really?
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Let's definitely recognize the movers and shakers and those names. I love it. Another plug-in is I've been interning with Joel Jacinto for the
Joel
LA.
Jacinto.
shout out.
Hi, Joel.
Love Joel.
Kamish.
Along with my very dear friend Christine De Los Santos, and we've been working for a really big celebration called FAM LA, Filipino American History Month, Los Angeles. I believe, the date. I believe
October
it is
23rd.
Right, October
Joe
23rd. Joe knows. That's
At the Greek
awesome.
Theater.
At the Greek Theater, a lot of huge celebration that's happening. Otherwise, really, really stay plugged in with Samang Filipino at UCLA and the Filipino floor. There's a lot of really great things that are happening.
Send us links for anything and we'll put it on the blog.
Definitely.
You should call it the Filipino floor.
I know the Filipino
Joe.
floor.
That'd be cool,
Filipina.
dude.
We'll talk about this.
P squared.
Stop.
But one last plug-in before I leave. We're for Samang Filipino. One of our campaigns is the campaign for Filipino studies. Really trying to generate, the same conversation that we're having is how can we secure more opportunities for us to learn about our identity and culture. This Filipino floor is one thing that we're trying to aim for this year as Samang Filipinos. We're trying to establish the Filipino minor at UCLA. So hopefully bring that up to admin. There'll be pushback, obviously, but us as students, we're very excited to try to fight for this. We want to hopefully continue to be a role model for other campuses to establish their own sense of Filipino studies. So yes, stay updated and stay connected. Love to hear from you.
And it's CCUP, right?
So CCAPS is the California Coalition for Filipino Studies,
Okay.
and that's the more of a statewide
Okay.
coalition. But for our campaign for Filipino Studies, we're going to try to get that Filipino minor at UCLA.
Where can they get information about that? Is there a website or Facebook or?
You can go to our
Snapchat.
Facebook, type in Samahang Filipino. You can also go to our website, spbruins.com, for more information.
Great.
Yes.
I have any plugs?
Yes, as we know, next month will be Filipino American History or Heritage Month. I know there's a lot of semantics there, but I know that there's a few events, especially with Larry Itliong Day. I know in historic Filipino town there's that October 22nd parade that's happening, and also in Carson, I believe too. So I'm sure we'll get there. We'll get a lot of other announcements. Also, we have a class at Cal State Long Beach. Any of our classes at any university, I feel that if students even know someone there, to encourage others and friends to enroll in these classes, to again save these classes, because departments and universities are looking at numbers. Next semester, we are going to launch our first transnational Filipino communities class at Cal State Long Beach. It's been in the books, in the catalog for a while, but it's never been taught yet because the class is never filled up. So it'd be wonderful if that class was filled up. And lastly, I would like to pitch a Filipino language movement. I bought my first domain. I have no clue how to work it, but my goal is to have that as a space to share the different Filipino language efforts that are happening throughout the United States,
Nice.
and also so institutionalized
Nice.
as well as informal. So I'll probably start off with a Facebook, and I'm working on it in the process. And
GeoCities.
talking GeoCities, talking with different people, because it's a community effort. I just want people to know to see what's happening, so when they do their Google search of how can I start a Filipino or Tagalog class, that there's some basic tips there. It doesn't happen, it's not a strict it's not a cookie cutter method for everyone, but at least they have some tips too, because a place like UC Santa Barbara, students there contacted me through Google asking how they can start a Tagalog class at their
Yeah.
campus. So that just reminded me, put it out there, and hopefully we'll get more feedback from the rest of the community.
Nice. Elaine? Miss Plugs?
I'll do plug left, sir. Yeah, at the end.
This is the end.
Oh, this is the end? Oh, never mind. Hold on.
It's a good movie. This is the end.
This is the end. This is the end of our story. Okay, plugs. Events. As I said earlier, the Festival of Philippine Arts and Culture will be Saturday, October 8th, held at Echo Park from 11 to 7 p.m. I think that's the time. TFAL, this Filipino American Life, will be there recording. So if you want to come say hi to us, come to FPAC at Echo Park Lake.
Hopefully we publish this podcast.
Hopefully we publish this podcast before FPAC.
As we look at Mike, and as he looks at his watch.
If not, FPAC was amazing. Thank you to everybody who came.
2017.
FPAC was awesome. Thank you for everybody who came. Other events, Color Your Troubles Away, October 27th at Pot Lobby Bar at the Line Hotel in Koreatown, Los Angeles. I'll be there. It's down that day. Come say hi. Come color with us. We will have... We are trying to have a TFAL theme sheet every month. So that would be technically the fourth sheet. So maybe sheet. There's something here called Savor Filipino on October 15th.
Yeah, so Savor Filipino, it's I guess a Filipino food festival by the Filipino food movement up in the Bay Area. It's going to be October 15th in Oakland.
Let's go.
I can't go because I'm going to go to this next event called the Filipino Palimpsest Conference.
Oh, right.
Filipino Palimpsest Conference it's kind of like a gathering of the kind of foremost Filipino scholars in the nation. And also the diaspora.
Exciting month of October.
jealous.
I'm not presenting at all. I'm just going to soak up any information.
To be
You're going
intellectual.
there? Yay!
Yay, I'm going to be there. You will
So the-
bond. Plug the podcast.
So Savor Filipino is October 15th in Oakland, and the Palimpsest Conference is October 14th to the 16th in San Diego, both at USD and UCSD.
Awesome.
Cool.
Also, producer Mike started an Instagram account called AZN143637.
Yes.
That's a great name.
Follow it. Send us your best AZN pictures to thisfilipinoamericanlife@gmail.com. Give us as much or as little information about your picture as if you would like, and we will post it. If you check that Instagram account right now, you will see various pictures of the TFL crew. I am the least AZN on that page, but
I am the least AZN.
no,
Whatever,
you're not.
dude.
Yours is.
You can't even find me there.
I can't.
I am the least.
I think Joe is the most. But definitely
follow.
dig up your Sanrio picture wallets, find your photo makers pictures, take a picture and email it to us. We will gladly post it and share it with the universe. All right. So thank you for listening. Remember to rate and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. It helps people find the podcast and it makes us look awesome, and we will get on like the front page if we can get enough likes. Tell your friends to subscribe to us on iTunes because it means we might eventually one day get a sponsor. Who knows? We want that sponsorship monies, because it's kind of money intensive to run this thing. And what else? What other plugs do you have?
That's it. I think
That's
we're
it?
over time.
That's over time. Okay. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at TFL Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Pew, pew, pew.
Thank you.